Hello everyone, my name is Olivia, and today I wanted to recommend 5 memoirs that I want everyone to read because I'm absolutely in love with them. I have another memoir video that I want to film in the future, so this is kind of focusing on memoirs that aren't necessarily written by famous people, as in celebrities, people who you see at the Met Gala. These are memoirs written by incredibly intelligent people who are sharing pieces of their life, their career, their wisdom, and their experiences. And while some may be more well-known than others, they aren't the biggest celebrities of all time. I do want to do a celebrity memoir video in the future, so let me know what you think about that. And I also want to know what are some of your favorite memoirs before we get into my recommendations. But let's get right into it because these books are all 5-star reads and are some of my favorite books of all time. The first memoir that I have to recommend is Just Mercy by Bryan Stevenson. Bryan Stevenson is a very influential attorney who works in the criminal justice system, and he actually created the Equal Justice Initiative, which provides legal assistance to those who cannot afford it, those who are on death row, and those who need it the most in our communities. In this memoir, Bryan Stevenson chronicles his journey into becoming a lawyer and the different cases that he had to take on and his eventual creation of the Equal Justice Initiative. But at the heart of this memoir, we follow his case dealing with Walter McMillan, who is a young man who was sentenced to die for a crime he did not commit. So not only does Bryan Stevenson talk about his career into becoming a lawyer and the difficulties that he faced along the way, but he also talks about mass incarceration, death row, the death penalty, and the fact that so many young people today, especially Black children, are being accused of crimes and being charged as adults when they are only teenagers. This memoir has also been turned into a film and I highly recommend it. I don't feel like a lot of people have seen it. It stars Michael B. Jordan and is one of the most moving movies that I've ever seen. It made me absolutely bawl my eyes out. If you love reading about true crime or listening to true crime podcasts, I would highly recommend reading or listening to Just Mercy, which is actually narrated by Bryan Stevenson himself in his audiobook. It just shines a light on a different side of true crime. It shines a light on the lawyers who are trying to protect the people who are falsely accused, or for people who don't have adequate representation, because that is a civil right for all of us. Highly recommend it. It's definitely a heartbreaking yet insightful read, and I'm just in awe of all that Bryan Stevenson has done and will do in the future. Another memoir that is incredibly hard-hitting but is one of the most important books that I can recommend to every single reader around the world is Night by Elie Wiesel. Elie Wiesel was born in Transylvania when in 1944 he was taken to the Auschwitz concentration camp. In this memoir, we follow Elie as he is ripped away from his household and his family is separated and put into these concentration camps, and he does everything in his power to survive and recount the absolute horrors that he had to witness during his time in these camps. And the way that he recounts this story and tells the story of his life and his family's life is one of the most heartbreaking and heart-wrenching things that you will ever read, but it's also so incredibly important. One of my favorite quotes from this memoir is, "To forget would not only be dangerous but offensive. To forget the dead would be akin to killing them a second time." It is incredibly powerful. It's incredibly upsetting to read about. It is a very quick read that I would say you could read in one sitting, but I definitely had to take my time with it because it is so dark. But I am incredibly appreciative of Elie for recounting his experience during this horrible time in history. And I always think about this memoir in particular because it reminds me that there are so many parts of history that we should not forget. And this is definitely a memoir that keeps that memory alive and reminds you of this time in history that we should not repeat. The next memoir that I have to recommend is much lighter than the first two that I recommended, and it's my first foray into travel memoirs, and it's something that I realized I have fallen in love with. I'm a big sucker of people who move from their home country into another, or they are going on a vacation and they recount their time in that other country or that other region, and it's just such a fascinating, very low-key memoir to read about because each person has their own experience experience traveling somewhere new, they make new friends, they fall in love, they try out the food and a different culture from their own, and it's so fun. So the first memoir that introduced me to the subgenre was Bella Figura by Kamen Mohammadi. Bella Figura initially caught my eye at BookCon and I had to get my hands on it, and it is about Kamen, who is working her corporate life in London when she begins to realize that her corporate life is not the life that she wants to live. It is ruining not only her mental health but her physical health, so she decides to quit her job and move to Italy for a year because one of her friends has offered their flat to her for the year. So this novel is split into 12 parts for each month of the year, and it just chronicles Kamen's life as she is living in Italy. She is learning the culture, she is immersing herself into museums and to different restaurants and to the people around her, and she begins to make friends, she dates, she tries new food, and she's learning more about the Italian culture and the idea of Bella Figura. It says the concept of Bella Figura is about making every aspect of life as beautiful as it can be, whether in Rome, London, New York, or Vancouver. It is a notion at once romantic and practical. It encompasses everything we do, from what we eat to how we work in the mornings. This is a perfect book for people who like to romanticize their life and people who want to appreciate these smaller things in their everyday life. This really taught me how to slow down and just romanticize the different aspects of my life and to see the beauty all around me. It really changed the way that I thought when I initially read it, and I just have this vivid memory of me reading this on the beach with my friend during the summer, and I remember just feeling so happy and inspired by this story, and it really shifted something in my mindset and changed me for the better. And I love this memoir. I always recommend it. I want more people to pick it up because I don't see a lot of people picking it up, and it's just a beautiful memoir that makes you feel like you're in Italy. Another memoir that you are probably so tired of me recommending, but I will not stop because once I read it, my mind shifted again because I learned so much from this memoir, and it is Untamed by Glennon Doyle. Untamed is a series of essays recounting Glennon Doyle's experiences as she reclaims her life, takes the reign, and becomes untamed. It says Glennon decided to quit abandoning herself and to instead abandon the world's expectations of her. She quit being good so she could be free. She quit pleasing and started living. This is the perfect memoir for people pleasers, and that's what initially made me buy this book, because I saw someone say, if you're a people pleaser, read this book on TikTok, and I was like, wow, the For You page really knows me. Like, how did it know that I was a people pleaser? Is my algorithm that easy to read? Who knows? But it came across my For You page and I immediately picked up the book and I was forever changed by it. There are so many different things that Glennon Doyle discusses. She discusses marriage, motherhood, her career, her relationships with her friends, her sexuality, her relationship with her parents, and just so much more. Glennon Doyle just reminds people of their worth, and their worth in every aspect of life, in your job, in your relationships, in your friendships, in just interacting with strangers. And she reminds you to live your most authentic self, to settle in your knowing, and to really become your own personal best friend. There are so many different topics that she speaks about that I was just jaw dropped because I agreed with so many different things. She's not necessarily telling you how to live your life. Instead, she is looking at these different experiences in her own life and dissecting them and analyzing them from a new lens, from this untamed lens. And it is fantastic, mind-blowing, the perfect book to wake up your mind, shift your mindset, and really settle into who you are as a person. I feel like this transitional moment as a woman in your 20s is so important, and if you read this book during that time, it'll really help you gain confidence and speak up for yourself and just be your best self. Loved it, amazing, I'm so glad I picked this up. The final memoir that I have to recommend for this video is Crying in H Mart by Michelle Zauner. Michelle Zauner is one of the band members for the indie band Japanese Breakfast, and she wrote a memoir recounting her relationship with her mother, losing her mother, her Korean American identity, and discovering who she is as a person after losing her mother. Michelle Zauner has a way with words, and this memoir feels somewhat like fiction in the way that it flows so beautifully, and you fall into her story as she discusses her Korean American identity and trying to connect with her Korean culture through food and through her relationship with her mother, and how that shifts after she loses her mother and she has to navigate this world by herself. It felt like a friend was recounting some of the most personal details of their life to you, and it felt like a privilege to be able to spend time with Michelle's experiences and to learn more about her and feel connected to her in this relatable way if you are a child of immigrants and you are trying to forge your own identity. And I thought it was so beautiful and relatable and explores grief and family and identity in such a wonderful way. I did not expect to love it as much as I did, but it was such a pleasant surprise, and I cannot recommend it enough. 10 out of 10 to all these memoirs. And all these memoirs just have so much to offer, and I want people to give them a shot. If you have never read a memoir before, I would highly recommend starting with any of these, because these memoirs feel so inviting to people who may have never read a memoir before. I highly recommend looking at your own interests and trying to find a memoir that fits that interest if you are trying to dive into memoirs. I was previously someone who was like, oh, I'll never read nonfiction. Like, nonfiction is just not for me. I was definitely that person in high school, but once I discovered memoirs and I kind of fell in love with them, I was just changed for the better, because they provide you with so much knowledge, so much insight, and reminds you that everyone has such a complex experience in life, but they also deal with universal themes that we may not necessarily relate to, but they can provide us with a lot of insight. If you have some memoirs that you want to recommend to me as well, please tell me all about it in the comments. I would love to add more to my TBR, and let me know if there are a couple that I should be listening to on audiobook. I will be sure to film another memoir video in the future recommending some of my favorite celebrity memoirs, because I have dove into that subgenre of nonfiction and they are fantastic. Such a pleasant surprise, and I have a lot of recommendations for you. So let me know if you're excited for that video as well. If you want to connect with me anywhere else on social media, all my links will be down below. If you have made it this far in the video, leave a black or white heart emoji down below so we can see who stays for the longest in my videos. If you do, thank you so much, and I appreciate you so much. I will see you in another video very soon. Thanks for sticking around. Bye!